Hi everyone, I'm here with Sally Edelstein, a visual storyteller, collage artist, and writer based in New York. Her collage work has been nationally exhibited and her essays have been featured in The Independent, Next Avenue, and New York Daily News, to name a few. Sally considers herself a visual archaeologist digging deep into American mythology, excavating and examining the social fiction we and society have told ourselves for the past 70 years. Her essay, Finding Solace, speaks about her lifelong battle with depression, PTSD, and how she found solace and strength in her Jewish heritage during visits to her family's cemetery in Queens, New York. Thanks for being here, Sally. I'm excited to talk more about your essay and learn more about the experiences that led you to write this piece.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about it and to read this and to share some of the content and feelings behind what I wrote, which I think have a universal import.
I'm excited to talk about this. Depression is such a stigmatized mental health illness. I think the more that we can talk about it and raise awareness and make people feel accepted and feel like it's okay to have these strong feelings and struggle, I think the better we can make it a situation for somebody else who might also be there, but a little bit afraid of speaking out about their own struggles. So I think your essay really touches on an important topic. But I think it's so beautiful how you found solace and where. But first, I want to start off by asking you a little bit about your writing experience. If you could tell me how you got started with writing, if there's a specific moment or event that led you to pursue writing, or if it's always been a lifelong interest of yours.
I mean, it's interesting. I've always been I would consider myself a storyteller, and it's evolved into different formats. Many years ago, I actually wrote and illustrated a book called This Year's Girl. It was published by Doubleday, but I still never considered myself a writer. My brother, I have an older brother, is a journalist, and somehow I felt, well, okay, he's the writer, I'm the artist. I can't cross lanes. And so for many years, I didn't want to consider myself a writer. But it seems when certain pivotal times in my life, when there've been either some kind of trauma or upset, I changed my creative way of thinking. So when my parents were getting much older, my mother was dying, I became involved in wanting to sort of write a memoir. And then I wrote a blog, which was sort of talking about a memoir and history. And then I had a real trauma where I lost my home through foreclosure, as I talked about in the essay. And I was filled with so much shame that I couldn't tell anyone about it. But suddenly I started to talk to a couple of people online about it. And from that, I said, you know what? I think I can start to talk about that in a broader sense. So I started to want to write. I was 65 years old. I put out a pitch. The first pitch that I did, I sold it. And it was the story of losing my home. And that kind of started me wanting to write personal essays. And I took the plunge of like everything else is lost. Let's see where I can go with that. And that's sort of how the genesis of how that happened.
Wow, that's amazing. I love the idea. What's the worst that can happen by taking this risk of putting out this piece of writing and processing your emotions out through writing? That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Also, there was shame. I kept secrets. I keep secrets. I don't want to talk about things. And suddenly I realized, you know what? I started to suddenly tell a few people about this scary thing that happened, and they were so loving and caring. And I realized, you know what? People have a lot more humanity than you think that they do. And suddenly it felt important. You know what? Other people may have had a similar experience. I need to share my pain that someone else might recognize themselves in that I'm not alone in that pain. So I felt the need to want to share that. And that was kind of the impetus too. Like,
Yeah, that's a lot of the reasoning why I wanted to start this podcast is the idea of helping other women not feel alone in their experiences because there are so many stories. Even if you can't relate to every piece, I always say, even if you can connect to one part of it, Or maybe there is somebody who completely sees themselves reflected in your story and goes, oh my goodness, I've been through that too. And I feel less alone just by hearing these words, not even necessarily having a solution, but just having someone else that they can connect to because they've experienced the same
No, that's
loss or
exactly right. It's not about the solution to it's just, you know what? I feel so isolated in my feelings, but other people are feeling that too.
definitely. So I think it's beautiful that you wrote that piece and then this one as well. Um, your essay touches on a heavy topic, and from personal experience dealing with depression myself, I feel like it can really consume your entire identity of just feeling like everything is sort of wrapped in this layer of depression. And so, um, can you tell me more about you and having battled with this depression? Are there moments of joy that helped you offset the depression when it was maybe at its hardest, or that helped you in moments where you really needed something to pull yourself up? Like, were there people in your life or experiences that really sparked joy for you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there. Like, I would have to think I've always sort of had this feeling of depression. I had been sexually abused by my father at a very young age, and it kept me kind of silent. I think that's also I contained all my feelings. I also was told to be silent, so I never really talked, and so I distrusted my voice, and so I ended up being an artist because I don't really know words. I can't really talk, but I could express myself visually. As a young woman, a young girl, as a teenager, I was very depressed. As I said, I'm 69 now, so we're talking about 1972. Like in 1972, because I had done some research on this, depression was something that they did not think affected children. It was something that was more for middle-aged women, menopausal women. It was not children or teenagers went through moodiness or changes. It wasn't depression, and so they didn't really know how to deal with that. But I felt there was this incredible stigma, like to even come out about wanting to go to therapy. I remember talking to my mom. I said, I really need to talk to someone. And I give her credit that she found a therapist for me to talk to, but there was so much shame that was attached to it that I could never even tell my friends when they would ask, well, oh, we're getting together after school. And every Thursday I would say, well, I'm seeing my cardiologist. I'm thinking, okay, they bought this story that a 17-year-old girl is going to see a cardiologist, but it's a great metaphor because I was dealing with my heart. But somehow it seemed better that I could have a heart condition than to say, yeah, I'm actually dealing with depression. So it was a very different time, but I knew that it was a serious issue that I really needed to talk to someone about it.
Yeah. You raise a really good point. It still feels that way that if it's not something physical that you can see, I mean, I
Right.
think with depression and so many other chronic conditions, it's like if you can't see it, then this person must be exaggerating it, making it up. People really need tangible things, a bruise on your arm or you broke your foot or something. But when it's something emotional or inside, it's just so difficult to get people to understand the magnitude of how severe it might be. I think
No, it's
still to
very
this
true.
day.
As a child, and I knew there was something going on. I said, "Well, I wish I had polio because then they would actually understand that I'm in pain because it was a physical ailment." It is very hard. I mean, I think it's a lot better now, and of course, now there's this epidemic among young girls, young boys, and which is so frightening. But we are talking about it nonetheless. I don't know what that impact is, and I think people are getting more help. But it is this very difficult thing. It's a very lonely feeling and state of mind. This is something we all experience to one extreme or another. Everybody gets depressed. Everyone has some kind of issues that they don't want to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask you if there was a moment when you realized that you needed to address your depression or if it was just something you were going to live with. But I'm wondering, was it as early as 7 or did it reach a more severe point where you were like, okay, there's something more that I need to do about this?
So I started therapy. I was 17. I have no idea what I said or didn't say.
Yeah.
I suspect I wasn't as revelatory. I was also experiencing an eating disorder. Did I talk about that? I don't know. Did they even know what that was? So, it's hard to say. I'm grateful that I had this opportunity. It was, he was a psychiatrist. He was good enough, but I do believe I felt as a young girl, 8 years old, 9 years old, I think I did feel suicidal. Like that felt like that was an option. Like even if I couldn't put it into words, I felt I couldn't go on. Like that somehow there had to be an end to this.
Yeah, that's difficult to feel that at 7. Even to an extent now, it's probably hard to tell. Like, is the child being moody, having a bad day, or are they really struggling too? But even back then, where it was like not even conceivable that a child would be suffering, I mean, it makes it even harder to. But I think it's also interesting that you mentioned that you didn't even have the words for it. And you had mentioned before that you had sort of struggled with finding your voice. So I'm curious, when did you figure out the words for what it was? Was it through personal research? And then when did you feel emboldened enough to say, okay, I do have depression, this is what it is, and I can share it with people?
Well, it's interesting. I was a very late bloomer in everything, and I continue to be a late bloomer. But I didn't talk till I was about 2.5, and then that was when this sexual abuse began, and so I quieted my voice and I didn't speak. So I then became an artist, and so I created this character named Pierre, who was this alternative person, and I was this little Frenchman, and I was a painter, and I lived in Paris, and I had this person, and everybody in the family had to call me Pierre, and I had a little mustache, and I had a little hat, and that's who I was, and that Pierre sort of got me through many, many, many years. But I really had problems in speaking, but I could express myself either through Pierre or through my drawings. But once I got to school, I would have to talk. So what I figured out what to do is I would go through dictionaries and I would flip through pages and I cut out words that resonated for me. And I put these words on paper and then I would put them together to make a sentence and it would tell my feelings. And that was the way I could do that. And I still do that now. Like when there are things I can't talk about, I cut out words and I create this. And it was almost like a Ouija board. I didn't know what I was going to say. And these little pieces of paper would move together and tell a story. And that was the
Wow.
device that I learned to sort of express myself.
Wow. I'm thinking about all your collage work and how you really started. So you just by trying to find the words, and now you're collaging your feelings in through this dictionary exercise, but then you moved on to collaging and creating these beautiful works of art. So wow, that's amazing. I was going to ask you a role creativity played in navigating all of these challenges and emotions, and you sort of mentioned it a little bit here, but were there other ways where you felt like creativity became your outlet to really
It's
express
always
yourself?
been as from the beginning of being this, little Pierre, like as an artist. And once Pierre moved on, and then I pretended I had this large advertising agency, and I was in charge of the advertising agency. So I had all these creative things. This was how I empowered myself by creating all sorts of things. And creativity has always been the one place that I can feel comfortable in and feel protected in. It's safe and I can feel good about myself and again empowered. And so
Wow.
when I can create, when I get into a block, it's like, who am I? Like it's very
Mm.
distressing. So there's a double edge to that. Like,
Yeah, yeah, because it's such a big part of your identity now, the
right.
creative. Wow. And what inspires you when you're in these moments of creativity? Is it mostly stem from emotions that you're feeling, or are there other things that inspire your work?
Right now, I would say I'm very moved by what's going on socially, politically, but I often draw it back to something in my personal life in the past, but make it contemporary. I'm stimulated by certainly current events, but put it in a historical context. So if there's a historical context, it's an emotional context for me, um, in say my childhood.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Um, you've mentioned that you're Jewish, and you have, so, and you found solace in this cemetery with all your Jewish ancestors. I'm curious how your Jewish faith has inspired um, your writing, your work, but also if it impacted the way that you express the fact that you were depressed, if it held you back or if it actually empowered you to speak about it. Because I know in your essay you mentioned it being a sin, but then having a more progressive understanding of it. So I'm curious, along the way, have you had to come to terms with things about your Jewish heritage that predict how you're feeling, or beliefs that you've had?
No, I'm very comfortable with. I grew up as a Reformed Jew, which is a more liberal interpretation of Judaism versus a more conservative way. So it's a more expansive. It's more contemporary. In relation to, say, the cemetery, it had always been that if one committed suicide, there was always this thing that hung over my head. If you commit suicide, you cannot be buried in a cemetery. It's sort of this unwritten law. Like, so that would always be something that, well, if you commit suicide, you can't be buried there. Like, and that would weigh on my mind. But in Reform Judaism, they do recognize suicide as a mental illness or a problem. It's something that we need to work with, and it's no longer a sin, and so therefore I could be buried there. But it had always weighed on me, this dated notion of what that is. Like, but being raised as a Jew and a New York Jew, like, there is this incredible sense of social justice that is part of my belief system. That is very important, and a sense of righteousness and of humanity. So that has always informed me.
And has that sense of social justice impacted or inspired any of your collage works or even pieces of writing?
All of the above. I mean, particularly in my artwork, I did an entire series called Media Made Women, and I have these 8 foot long collages of how media has influenced how a woman should identify herself and how she should aspire, and so it's filled with hundreds of images about whether you should be a housewife, you should be this, where women's live, and it's all the images that people my age have ingested through the years and helped to inform us. Like, politically, one of the strongest pieces that I did is a gun violence piece that I did when I was 13. I saved an ad that appeared in the New York Times in 1969. And it was a full-page ad with a picture of Robert Kennedy, John Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. And it was anti-gun violence. And it said, "Hold this paper for a year. Hope and pray that it ends." Now, I saved it all these years. Of course, it has not ended. I mean, it was pretty amazing that that came out at that time. I saved this piece of paper 50 years. I finally used it in a collage juxtaposed against all the violence that has gone on since then. And I wrote it in handwriting, all the different school shootings, this and that.
Wow.
So it was a very powerful thing to save this thing that I knew somehow I'm going to use this somewhere in my life, that this is an important piece of paper. And then I used it in a collage that was exhibited all over. I was really grateful last year. I was in an exhibit in Highland Park. I had a one-woman show, and it was the anniversary of the shooting that they had that July 4th. And I had this piece there about gun violence. And so it was very meaningful to me.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a lot of activism in your work and in your writing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And that it feels very true to you, but it's beautiful that you held that piece, but then you're trying to do something to raise awareness.
Well, yes.
And that's so important because, as you said, holding on to this piece of paper, and the hope was that in 1 year it would be a non-issue. And can you imagine it's still even getting worse, actually?
And what was crazy, the language in the time was like, "Hope and prayers are not enough." That could be written today. I mean, it was just so startling to see those words, and it's like, yeah, no, they're not. And 50 years later, they're still not. Like,
No, not at all. It's certainly it's not enough at all. Whenever I hear that, I cringe a little bit because we need policy. We need more,
Right.
especially when it comes to children. I mean, what you were saying earlier about the epidemic. I mean, having gun violence in your school is certainly not helping any child's mental health at all.
I went back, last year was my 50th high school reunion. And I went, but I didn't want to go to the reunion, but I wanted to have a reunion with my high school. So I went back to my high school, which I hadn't been to for 50 years. And one of the big differences is all the protocols they have for gun violence. So every window has a number on it, so that if there is like an incident, they know, okay, it's window number 32. It was so startling to see the same building, but all the new protocols that are in place. It was very sad. It was very sad to see that. Like, but it was a very stark reality. Like,
Wow, you're seeing this every day as a child, like all these
right.
things around you. In case the day comes, that's not helpful at all. It upsets me every time I see. I'm like, oh, here we go again. It's just so
I
often. It
know.
makes
I
me so
know.
sad. I'm curious about your thoughts on the way that our society today. I mean, there's obviously been changes from when you were a child, but what is your opinion on how society handles mental health issues and supports people that are struggling with it? I mean, are there things that you wish were different or things that you think are working on the flip side of?
Well, I mean, there's certainly so much more dialogue, and that's really important. On the other hand, when I think of, like, say, women today, the whole social media thing, it's frightening. As much as we're talking about things, the pressures that people are under, that could expose them to create more depressed feelings. Like, all our dialogue is all well and good. However, there are all these other things that are creating situations that could create a depressed environment. I mean, look, I kept thinking about Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania,
Oh,
like, who came out being depressed and that he had been hospitalized, etc. And that's fantastic, because I contrasted in 1972, you had this guy named Eagleton who ran with McGovern, who ran against Nixon. He had said he had been treated for depression and he had to immediately get off the ticket. Like, it was a scandal. It was horrendous. It's like, oh my God, like, this guy who's been depressed, he's been hospitalized. You can't possibly have him on the ticket. So, I mean, there certainly has been change, but I feel still there is a stigma. I mean, you know what I kept thinking of? You hear Trump, people, they're coming from mental asylums. First of all, the word on itself, like, it's not a mental asylum. There are mental health facilities, but it's mental
right.
asylums were insane asylums, and yet people still think of it in that way.
Yeah, which I think just increases the shame that you feel.
Absolutely.
There's a whole spectrum of mental health illnesses, but if you're struggling with one thing and you feel like if you go for help, you're automatically going to be seen as this crazy person. It's like you're no longer taken seriously because you went for help. We shame people for seeking help and trying to
We
find
do. Like,
a remedy.
sadly, we still do. I mean, it's so much better. And I think that's some of what I wanted to do in the piece that I wrote, is that, I can appear as you do appear. Like, what? I'm this happy, pleasant woman, like, and it would seem like everything is okay. And it's deceiving. And we don't
Right.
know what is going on with other people. And I think that's what it is. Sometimes someone might say something in a joking way. You need to really listen to other people. You really need to hear what they're saying. And
Hmm.
sometimes we don't.
No, no. And I think to your point earlier about social media, I don't think that has helped at all because we are sort of been put in this situation where we have to have this perfectly curated life that goes on the internet. And then we cannot deviate from that narrative in any way. For a long time, I felt like you had to put the perfect photo with the perfect lighting. And there's no way you would tell anybody that actually on that day you were severely depressed. It's just put on this, you know, facade of being perfect and well, and
Right.
it
And so
doesn't help.
belies the truth. So,
Mm.
I had done this whole series of photographs at the cemetery. It was just me being sad, being upset. And those were important images to show. That's how we are. But we aren't showing that. And yes, we have to have this curated life, which is it's an impossibility. Like,
It is, yeah. And if you are struggling and you see this, you think everyone else is fine
Right,
and there's something wrong with me because I'm struggling versus other people are struggling too.
right.
Which is why I think it's great to have pieces like this to really remind people that so many of us are actually there. I feel like there's more of us struggling than are great at this
I
point.
think more are, there's no question. I have friends who I know are having problems or, and a lot of issues, and they'll be posting these wonderful, happy things, and, thinking, why are you doing, I mean, it's great you're doing this, but I know what the reality is behind that,
Mm-hmm.
and it does an injustice to all of us because we all are struggling. There's not a soul who doesn't have something going on in their lives in some way.
No, definitely. And it seems like you sort of knew, despite the fact that there was so much stigma, that even at a young age, that you wanted to find help, regardless of whether it was going to be stigmatized. Did you continue with your therapy throughout? Did you feel like it helped with your depression, or was it really going to the cemetery? Were there other things that helped you um, navigate that throughout your life?
Well, no, in the classic, New York neurotic Jew, I've been in therapy my whole life. It's sort of like
Yeah.
the Woody Allen model. So I have been in therapy on and off. In all transparency, I actually had been hospitalized at a certain point. Um, in my early 30s, all the abuse that had happened with my father, I had kind of repressed. I have a dissociative problem. I dissociated and I couldn't really deal with it. And suddenly it started bubbling up. It was the best thing that I could have done. It was fantastic. Actually, that was when I started doing collage, which was a funny
Mm,
thing. Suddenly I was diagnosed with having dissociative personality, and that I had all these different parts of myself. And I thought, well, collage might be a good way to sort of express myself. And then that was a new form of art for me. So I have always worked on things, but there are certain tangible things like going to the cemetery. I needed to do something very physical to
mm-hmm.
move the needle a little bit.
Right. Yeah. When you were speaking earlier about Pierre, I thought it's so fascinating how our brains find ways to protect us, and to like create these worlds when we are have no words or we're going through something difficult. I know you say you officially started in your 30s collaging, but I think there was always a part of you that was already collaging and being creative even from before then. So I just think it's fascinating how you can take something that's painful, but somehow our minds just find a way to like make something beautiful out of it to protect us.
No, absolutely. I mean, the collage stuff is just. I was an illustrator. I was a painter, and
Mm,
I worked as a commercial illustrator, and then I decided to do collage. But all my work was still it was the same. I write as a collagist. My work is
mm,
collage. I mean, it's all different pieces, which is not what I am. I have lots of different parts of myself, and that's
mm.
what it's about. But yeah, the mind is brilliant how it manages things,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, um, I'm very grateful that I have been creative. That was my source and ability to deal with this pain.
yeah, yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, when you were a teenager and you asked your mom to go to therapy, did you sort of understand what was causing that and tell her? Or did you really not process the sexual abuse till
No,
later?
I didn't. No, I didn't. That didn't come about till I was about 33 or 34. Like
Mm,
suddenly memories started coming back, or images, intrusive thoughts, intrusive images started coming through. And I realized, okay, there's something going on, but I didn't have any actual memory of that.
and so did you tell anyone even after you realized it?
Um, it's funny. I came home. It took a long time. I said, all right, I'm going to tell my mother. Again, I'm 34, 35 maybe. And I said, look, that there was some kind of sexual abuse. So she's, oh, it must have been your brother, my older brother. And then I said, no, I said, I think it was my father. And, she didn't say one way or the other than to say, well, I remember him like always laying close to you in the bedroom, but then I would close the door and walk away. But anyhow, so I said, but mom, listen, I'm going to tell you this, but don't tell anybody. And I gave her a book to read. And the title of the book was something about like incest survivors. So then my father came home And he saw this book on my mother's dresser, and the first thing he said was, "Oh, what is this kid trying to lay on me?" Like, nobody accused him. Nobody said anything. I never said anything. And from that point on, I never said anything to him. He hid in the room. He never came out after that, and it was never discussed. I stopped talking to him for a couple of years, and then we just sort of reconnected. It was never a discussion about it.
So you were never really able to process it out loud with him?
No, but what I did do is I won't say I forgave him, but I accepted. I suspect he had been a victim of abuse by his mother, because his mother, my grandmother, had also abused me. So I thought there was a family history. So when my father was dying, my father's hands were always scary to me. I could never hold my father's hands. And so as he was dying, I saw this little boy and I said, he was in pain. And I held his hand and somehow it was all okay. And I said, you know what? I forgive you. And then there was peace. And then he died. And I felt it was okay.
Yeah. And you found peace for yourself.
I found peace for myself, and things happen, and I not that I forgive him, but I acknowledge it, I accept it, or
Yeah. Wow. Do you feel like that was a big trigger for your depression?
it might have been. Well, certainly the acknowledgement of what had happened was very much so, and I realized,
Right.
I had suffered with eating disorders, and I might have drank, and I did this. They were all triggers of what one does when one has abuse as a background, and I was a classic case of that. And it gave me a place to understand it all.
Yeah. To connect with yourself and your parts. Yeah.
Right. It's very funny because my mother, growing up, always told that he wasn't really my father. That she had an affair with a traveling salesman. And I think that was her way, because she may have known about what was going on, but that made it better because he wasn't really my father.
Yeah.
We all do have parts.
Yeah. And the different parts that protect us and make us completely forget about a trauma for a very long time.
Because my trauma, I have PTSD, and I did a great collage to kind of show how one processes information that you can know and not know at the same time. That whole system of knowing, it's not a narrative. Memory isn't a narrative. It's not a narrative. It's a whole different way of processing information. And so that was a very, very personal piece I did. It was a show about neurological problems. And so and I spoke about that. And that was one of the first times I really came out in a public way talking about what that's like to have that a dissociative disorder.
Oh, that's amazing. You've done some very cool things, Sally. I was gonna say, and it'd be great to even include, if you're willing, with your as one of your links. That's something else that I feel like we don't talk enough about, PTSD.
Oh yeah.
So many things we don't talk enough about. I'm curious, what are some lessons that you've learned from your lifelong battle with depression?
Trust your voice. Trust your voice. Try to quiet out the other voices. It is the hardest thing to do. But our own voice really is so smart and honest. And that is a hard thing to learn, because we spend our lives listening to these external sources, but our truth lies within us. What I've also learned is there is no expiration date for anything. You can keep doing things. As I said, 65, I got my first article published. Do you know what I did 2 weeks ago? I'm 69. I got my learner's permit for the first time. I've never driven, ever. And I said, there are issues at home with my husband, and he can't really drive anymore, and I have to take care of my dog. And so I need to learn how to drive. And it's a very scary thing, but you can do that. We can keep pushing ourselves. You can never say, well, I didn't do it because, I have this amount of time. There is no end. There's no end game.
Yeah, wow. That's incredible. Are you practicing driving on the road now?
I just got my driver's learner's permit. I'm going to I'm signing up to take lessons. So I haven't actually done it yet, but I will be doing it soon.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Good for you. I love that.
Thanks.
We talked a little bit earlier about how we might look a certain way to people. And, from the outside, it might be like, there's Sally happy with her dog walking down the street. So I'm curious how you manage the disconnect between the way somebody might perceive you and your ongoing battle with depression, PTSD, and things that inside that you're struggling with that are not potentially obvious to anyone just who's meeting you at a talk or reading a piece. How do you kind of balance that?
It's very hard. When I was younger, it was so much easier, like because it was okay to be a certain way. Now I don't know that I want that. I want my authentic self to be there. So that's almost more important than trying to look a certain way. The only thing I guess I want to make the message clear to people: don't be fooled. Just because you see me looking a certain way or I laugh, I use humor a lot to sort of get through things. That doesn't mean I'm not suffering inside. It's more now I'm trying to tell people or inform people, don't buy what you're seeing necessarily. That's the best
Yeah.
way I can manage it.
Yeah. No, but that's great that you are stepping into this phase of your life where you're like, I want to be my true self everywhere, and this is all of me.
Right.
But you're right that sometimes the person who's the happiest in the room or laughing or making all the jokes is really the one that's struggling. And I wish that more of us asked each other, like, truly, how are you doing? And because I
Right.
think we're always expecting people to just go good and then we move along, but to really care about that answer.
No, and I think that's exactly right. People say, oh, so how are you? Like, and they don't really want to know. They don't really want to know. And not that I go, well, I'm really depressed, but there's not an authentic question and there's not authentic answers. And I wish that there could be.
Yeah, yeah. I think we need more of that and to really listen to the
To
answer
listen.
and be there. I'm curious in general how community has helped you navigate depression or helped you find happiness in moments when you were struggling to find them for yourself, or if there were even moments where there was a lack of community. What your experience has been with community and how it's impacted you one way or another.
I tend to be as open as I can be in my writing or my work. As a woman, I keep a lot of things to myself. I still keep a lot of pain to myself, and I have a hard time sharing it with friends. And I have friends who are really caring. I just cannot seem to be able to do that. And so there is that lack. I will say I have this dog, and I've had dogs, and those are my people. I can gain strength and comfort and acceptance with a dog.
Beautiful. When you've written about your foreclosure and even this piece, though, have you felt comfortable sharing that with your friends? Is that easier to share written work versus speaking it out loud in a casual conversation?
I have come out about that, and that was something that was so secretive. And then I suddenly, came out of the closet about it, and then I was very open. But some of the minutia of it, or some of it's been a whole series of things that somehow I still keep some of it to myself, and it's hard. And even this, I have a struggle. I have a husband who is cognitively challenged, and it is a day-to-day struggle. It's a really difficult thing, and I can't always talk about that. And that's been very, very, very hard. That's been very hard.
Yeah. And was he somebody that you did feel comfortable being honest with about your other struggles, or have you always felt like as a woman you had to keep certain things to yourself?
In all honesty, because again, I think because he was a Holocaust survivor, he is someone who is shut down emotionally, can't ever talk about things. So I think part of that we never really talked about things, but now this is a new extreme. It probably was a good match because it was like a don't ask, don't tell. However, the very most positive thing again with the dog, the area that he can be the most loving and attentive is with my dog Mo, and we both bond over him. And so we have this incredible here now experience together of just loving this dog, and that I focus on that, and that is really makes me very happy. Like,
Yeah. As you say that, I'm thinking about how it is so therapeutic to have a dog, especially when you don't have the words or you don't want to talk about something. It's just you can sort of give your emotions to your pet. And sometimes they even translate, even if you're struggling, as like affectionate emotion because you're sort of craving some type of connection. But they really do take on so much of our pain or joy and can really be therapeutic for us.
no, I mean, my dog is. There's no question it's a therapy dog. You know, I can be distrustful of people or nervous around people or unable to accept affection or physical affection with people, but with a dog, all bets are off. I mean, it's just this, total acceptance and loving situation. I had a dog who died last August, and I was absolutely devastated because he was my go-to person, and it
Yeah.
was very hard. It was very hard. Like,
No, that I can imagine. How long between having your old dog and getting Mo did you wait?
um, we got him in January, and Stanley died in August, so 5 months or so.
Okay.
And it was a whole process of dog dating and going through the whole trying to find a dog and getting a dog online. I mean, it really was quite the experience. But I ended up with this really wonderful, wonderful rescue lab who didn't have the best of life, and now he has this wonderful life. And he rescued me. I
Oh,
rescued him. It's really it's a beautiful experience. It's
that's awesome. I
yeah,
love that. I know. I feel like some people are just dog people. I can't even imagine my life without a dog at this
right,
point. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome. So I wanted to also ask you, you started off feeling like your brother was the journalist and you were the artist, and now you've written your first piece. You've gotten multiple pieces published now in your 60s. So now you've really merged these two, like the visual art and the writing. How do you see those two coexisting in the future? Do you have ideas for projects or ways that you want to integrate both, or just kind of keep doing both of them in parallel?
Well, probably in parallel, but I have been working on a book, and I can see illustrating it. I can see doing it
Mm,
visually. So I mean, that would be the natural connection of the two.
yeah, yeah. And what is your book about that
Well,
you're
I
working?
have actually have two books. Like there is this one book that I had been working on, and it was called "Defrosting the Cold War: Fallout from My Nuclear Family." Like, and it was sort of a
Mm,
memoir about growing up, and so I have a lot of great illustrations of that. And then there was the entire story about how I came to find this dog Mo. People have been saying you need to do this thing about this rescue dog, and so it was this. It was like how my red state dog chased away my blues, like and about how he really helped me, like and how dogs have always helped me emotionally, and so I've got a bunch of drawings with that, and so both of those are sort of visual and text oriented. Like,
yeah, that's awesome. As you were saying that, I was thinking about how great it would be to have sort of an adult version, but then also a kid version of that same story with illustrations.
well, no, I think of it as a great
Yeah.
children's book. Okay, so he's from Louisiana. He's moving up to New York, and he's going to be in a blue state. But like when I go to the dog park, there's no blue dogs. There's no red dogs. It's just people. Like I don't know how they think politically. It doesn't even matter. We love our dogs. Like I love their dogs. Like we all just communicate. It's this beautiful universe of non-politics, and
Yeah.
it's such a lovely thing, and we lost that as people communicating, and but yet I am still friendly with Mo's foster mom. In fact, I write
Mhm.
her all the time, and she's this nice woman from Louisiana, and it's always, well, God bless you. I don't know what she thinks, but she's a Southern gal and like lovely. Never talk politics, but we talk about Mo, and we talk about dogs, we talk about wonderful philosophy, and it's such a wonderful experience. And in this such divided world we're living in, it's
Mhm.
such a wonderful thing. So it is a great children's book and a lesson about how dogs can bring us together.
If we would only look beyond the political identification, we might find that we actually have certain things that we can connect on with people but we just don't get past that unless you're at a dog park or something like that where you're not even having those but I feel like imagine if those same people were somewhere else and that was the first thing they talk. It's like they might not even get to the bonding over the fact that they both love dogs. You know, we don't even allow for that anymore.
That's exactly what we don't allow for that anymore, and that's very, very, very sad. It's very sad. But I'm glad for dogs that we can at least have that to connect and like.
Yeah. But that might be another essay, Sally. Your
No, I
dog
know. No,
party.
no, I've got a bunch percolating around.
What do you hope that readers take away from your essay?
I hope they take away that one. I hope a stigma gets taken away about mental health, depression. That someone may be suffering with depression. Someone may have suicide ideation, and that you really need to listen carefully to what people say and take them seriously. And for those who are suffering to feel recognized and heard.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's very important. That's along those lines. And as you come into your more authentic self, what would you hope to be your legacy looking into the future of how you want to be known? What kind of values do you want to be remembered for? What are things that are important to you that you feel like you would feel satisfied if you were remembered in this way?
Well, certainly as a person, I would want to be known as a compassionate person, but I want to be known as someone who told stories that need to be told, and stories to be looked at in ways that may not have been looked at before. That if I could provide a different perspective to something and to educate someone, but as a person, I want to be known as a kind, compassionate person.
Yeah. No. I love the idea of telling stories that needed to be told them.
Yeah, I mean that's my life's work. What I mean, if I would think of something I would write on my headstone, yeah, she told stories that needed to be told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, important ones too, so that I'm
Yeah.
sure that others can connect to, which is beautiful. Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, especially with this one, it's already a story that definitely needs to be told, and I'm sure other people will connect to it, like I did. As you, as you think back on your life, are there things that you wish that you could either tell your younger self or pieces of advice that you would have for other women, or both, as you reflect on your experiences?
I would certainly say, truly listen to your voice. To muffle out all the other noise, and there's going to be a lot of noise coming from all directions, but somehow there's some inner voice within you that is really the truth. And keep listening. Your gut knows. Listen to your gut. That really matters. And actually, also in terms of women, I would say things can get better as you get older. Life doesn't diminish at all. You can be more expansive. You can be fuller. That life just only can get so much better, and you're wiser and you're more perceptive. So try not to get hung up on age as much.
Yeah. Although our society keeps pushing that you have to look a certain way by X age, or you're no longer useful after a certain age. When you're saying muffle out all the other noise, I think that's a big one.
That's a big one. Look, I struggle with that, and yet I don't struggle with it. Again, I'm 69, and I'm accomplishing so much in my late 60s. And I'm looking forward to doing more. Next year I'll be 70. Which is also, these numbers are crazy. It's like I don't even know what that means, but it means something. But it's just also, what? It's how we can be.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And the fact that you're learning to drive now. You've been producing essays, and you're thinking about more works of art. It's you still have a lot of ideas.
You know what? I honestly feel I'm just starting. I really am. And I'm not alone with this. I mean, this is something many, many women and men feel too. It's like you reach a point. It's like I'm expanding. I'm just expanding. that is a great life lesson for anyone to learn.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you're really looking forward to as you hit 70 or even think beyond?
Um, Driving. I don't. No, I can't say that. Just. I don't know what there's. I don't know what new form of expression I'm going to find. Like, I did this. I wrote, and then I did this video, and it won these awards. What am I going to? I don't know what other form that I might do, and it may be out there that I don't know yet, and I'm happy to know there's something that I don't know. There's some other way that I might communicate that I don't know right now. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But you're open to all these, to whatever medium comes that helps you express
exactly. It's
yourself.
like all I want to do is
Yeah.
I want to communicate whatever the form is. I may not know what it is right now, but my message is always the same, or my need to communicate is always there. It takes on different forms. Like,
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I forgot to ask you this earlier, but I was just curious if the loss of family connections or friends, just because things change, how has that affected your mental health? And have you found ways to cope with that grief as these situations arise, or have you found new ways to cope as time has gone on?
it's still an ongoing issue. Family has always been very, very important to me. But sometimes, as I've learned now, maybe some of the family connections were more of an illusion. Maybe they weren't really what I thought they were. And I'm trying to come to terms with maybe an idealized sense of what I thought my family was. But on the other hand, I also do give a great import to that. I have dear friends, and friends can be your chosen family. I mean, it's a cliche, but there is that. I'm trying to understand that, it doesn't need to be blood. Like, that I have friends who are so close and caring. I have a brother who lives 5 minutes from me, and he, doesn't communicate, doesn't see me, doesn't do anything. And that is still hard.
Mm.
But I reach out to other people, and I know that I've made good choices and friends in my life.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes we forget that you can choose your family, and it's unfortunate, but it's not always the people we are born into, or the people that are sort of like the prescribed family. It is the ones that, the community we make for ourselves that sometimes holds us and guides us and protects us more than the people we expected would. So I think it's great that you've been able to create a community around you of people who can support you um, as
It's
you're
because I've
navigating all these things.
No, I mean, I've always put great import into my family. I know a great deal of my family history. My home is filled with pictures going back to the 1870s of it. So I surround myself with my ancestors, and maybe they're more important than some of the ones who are living, who are a little bit more of a disappointment. But family is important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, I would say, a very challenging time for the Jewish community with the state of current affairs. I am wondering how it has impacted you and your mental health. Are there things that you wish were talked about more when it comes to the Jewish community that are potentially being ignored?
It's a very, very difficult time because I mean, even starting with Trump, the rise in anti-Semitism has only continued, and now, unfortunately, with what's going on in Israel, the anti-Semitism has only increased. And as we had discussed, I'm tremendously sympathetic to the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, in some of the fight for that, there's a lot of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic language has been used, and so it's been difficult. So as a result of that, I have personally been subjected to a lot of anti-Semitism. I have a blog, and I've been called a kike. I've had a lot of anti-Semitic comments made. I think I mentioned the article that I wrote, which I made into a video, and I had a video poster, a swastika was placed on it, which was placed over the tombstones of my family. It's extremely dissettling, and it's particularly hard for me. My husband is a Holocaust survivor. And so when I think of his life being bookended by this kind of anti Semitism, like this is what he knew as a little child, and that it should be in the last part of his life. And his parents came to America eventually, like thinking that this would be something that we would never have to deal with. And yet here we are. So it's been a very, very hard experience. To even express any support to the Palestinians can be seen as being disloyal to Israel, which I'm not. It's very, very hard. It's very
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, I'm sorry. That's tough. It's a very tough time. I'm wondering if there's anything that you wish we talked about, um, or that you'd want to, you know, share related to your essay or related to depression that you feel like would be important.
One like small little thing. So I wrote this story. Somehow I felt it was important that I needed to give my voice to it. It wasn't enough to just be read. That, to be truly honest, someone needed to hear my voice say these words and also see me. So that was the impetus to make this video, which I was just doing as a lark with a friend. And then it sort of expanded. So I started entering into these film festivals and they won awards, which wasn't my reason for doing it. But the most important one, got nominated for Best Voiceover. The symbolism of that was like, okay, I'm using my voice and I'm really being honored for using my voice. And so when it came to the awards ceremony, I was up against Liam Neeson. So
Oh,
I didn't,
wow.
I'm not going to win. And suddenly I heard my name mentioned. And for a little girl who could never speak in class and who couldn't use her voice, suddenly, of all the awards in the world, like that just meant so much. And it was really, really meaningful. And it was about that I could give voice to all those who can't give voice. And that really is
Mhm.
what it was all about for me, for in all the work that I do. So
Wow.
that was very, very, very meaningful.
That's amazing. He has quite the voice, so good for you. But you do have a lovely voice, so I'm not surprised at all. But I think to that point, I think that's one of the reasons why I've really felt like I've wanted people to read their piece at the beginning, because it's so different when you can hear the person who put all of the emotions and the work behind writing these words and then hearing them tell their story. I think it's just so important.
No, absolutely. I love that you want to do that because it takes it to such a different level. Like, I mean, reading is wonderful, but to hear someone say the words, I mean, is
Mhm.
profound. It's very profound.
I'm glad that you shared that. I'm glad that we're able to include it because I think that's very important. And I also think it's such a full circle moment, like because as you said, you didn't talk until you were 2, and you really struggled to find your voice, and then to win an award for your voice, it's incredible. So I'm glad that you had that
Oh,
win. Very
thanks.
deserving of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
um, so I don't have any more questions, but I want to thank you for sharing your essay and your story, not just the one that was in the essay, but just the other experiences that you've had. I think it's so very important, and I'm so moved by your experiences, but also so inspired by you, because I think it's so wonderful that you are still open to learning and growing and trying new things, and so excited for what's to come, and you're not
Oh,
allowing yourself to be defined by the depression. And as someone who struggled with it, it can be very crippling and really hold us back from feeling expansive or full. So I think it's so great that you're using creativity to push against it.
well, I
Yeah.
love what you're doing. And if you are struggling with depression, like the fact that you're doing this and that you're letting others speak is wonderful. Speaking their truth, like whatever it is. And so, this has been a great, great opportunity. I mean, I'm really loving talking with you, and like I hope others are
Thank you.
getting things out of this as well. Like,
Yeah, I hope so too. And I'm excited to share your episode and have other people feel as inspired. So thank you, Sally.